I am Dr. Max Miller. I was in the first class at the Air Force Academy, class of 1959. I entered it on the 11th of July, 1955, and I retired on the 1st of August, 1985. I spent uh, 4 years at the Academy, and the rest of my time was spent in the Air Force doing various jobs. I have a PhD in electrical engineering, which the Air Force was kind enough to give me 4 years at the Academy and 4.5 years in graduate school. So the Air Force has been very good to me, and I have tried to return the favor. My dad's story was around the period of Fiddler on the Roof. It was he came over in 1906 or 1907, in that time frame, as a 2 or 3 year old, and he was sponsored by his dad was sponsored by his dad was Sam, was being conscripted into the Tsar's army to be used as cannon fodder in Russia. So they left Belarus and came to the U.S. being sponsored by my grandfather's brother Morris. And this will be important later. Morris had 4 children, but 2 of them were David and Mary Miller. Mary Miller subsequently married a Mr. Silverman, and the rest of that story will be coming later. They grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I'm not sure how that was selected. I guess that's where the sponsor was. They were extremely poor because they had to leave everything back in order to get out of the country. They could bring nothing with them. They ran a small store in Lynchburg, and they lived over that little store. And I visited that a few years ago. It's in an urban renewal area. Right now it's all boarded up and will be torn down. As I said, they were poor, so my dad worked. He was a paper route and various things until he got old enough to do a more job, and he worked in a grocery store. And when he was a senior in high school, one of the local merchants in Lynchburg is a town with a lot of manufacturing, or it was in those days. And one of the manufacturers was in the grocery store, and he said, his name was Max also. We must have been Sephardic. I think you, Rabbi, know that the Sephardic had no prohibition on naming as Ashkenazi do. And I didn't know that at all, but I always got the question, well, why are you a junior? And so I learned about the Sephardim. And so I said, well, we must have been Sephardic. Of course we weren't, but they did it because they wanted to. But the fellow in the grocery store said, where are you going to college? And my dad said, I'm not. And he said, why not? You're a smart man, smart young man. And the Christian entrepreneur or factory owner said, well, you come by my plant on Monday morning. So we went by, and he said, I will give you the money to go. You work while you're going to college. It was a military school, so he had to work on the grounds. He worked in the dining hall serving meals. And he said, you pay me back after you get a job. And that's how it worked. Did not graduate in the top 10%. So that's all, the only ones that went into the military were active duty, were the top 10%. And he was with the other 90% that went into the inactive reserve. He went to North Carolina, and he was an electrical engineer, and he went to work for the power company, and he paid the fellow back. And I do not know his name. I wish I did. I wish I could contact his family. But then, so I was born in 37. And when I was 4 years old, we were out at the airport on a Sunday morning watching at Raleigh-Durham, RDU, watching the aircraft take off and land. And they announced on the radio of the old Chevy, the vacuum tube radio, that the Pearl Harbor had been bombed. So we turned around and went home to my mother, who was making the Sunday meal for us. And a few months later, my dad was sent into was activated as a reservist into the military. And he served the 4 years during the war and came home after the war. And then we moved so that he could get a better job. And I grew up, and on April, we discussed when I was a junior in high school where I was going to school, and he said, "You want to go to?" By then, VPI was known as Virginia Tech, and there I said, "No, I don't really want to go there." And he said, "Well, it's where I went, and you want to do the same kinds of engineering?" I said, "Yes, but I don't want to go in the military. I have no reason to go in the military." So on April the 1st of 1954, he's reading the afternoon paper, and he says, "Look, President Eisenhower signed a bill authorizing an Air Force Academy." And in as polite a way as I could, as a smart teenager, I said, I think we discussed it. I don't want to go in the military. And so he said, "Well, would you please read it?" And I said, "Sure." So I read it, and it said that the class is going to be so small, they're only going to take, that there isn't enough for every senator and congressman to even have one. So the only fair way they could consider to do it was to each one will nominate, I think it was 20, and the Air Force is going to select, maybe it was 10, it was some large number, and out of this large pool of whatever it was, 10,000, they were going to select 300. And so I, understanding statistics, having taken a course at the time, I said, the best of all worlds, I'll apply, I'll get rejected, and I did what he wanted to. And lo and behold, I was accepted. And I felt so honored about it. And I had visited our senator and talked to him about it. And I figured that it was a chance of a lifetime, which it turned out to be. And so I went, and when I got there, I figured all these guys are much better at this kind of thing than I will be. Many of them are dependents, sons of colonels and generals, and some of them are football players that were brought in. And I said, I'm going to just work as hard as I can every day, because that's what it's going to take for me to graduate from here. And once again, it did. And the academy taught me a lot of things that I had never known, never thought I could do. And it did its job. And the one thing it did was teach me that you do your best every day, and things work out. I went to primary and basic pilot training, and then I went to a flying unit, which was not what I wanted. It was a strategic air command, and I didn't want to be in strategic air command. I wanted to do something more exciting, and it was good. I mean, I can't complain, but that wasn't what I really wanted. So when I signed in, the first week I went to the education office and signed up to go back to graduate school. And they said, "Are you kidding, Lieutenant? You just got here and you have to be on a crew." And I said, "I understand that fully, but I'm career planning, and that's what you say to do." And okay. And they were very negative until they found out, well, what do you want to go for a master's in? I said, electrical engineering. And their whole attitude changed, because they couldn't get people to go. They couldn't fill their slots because nobody wanted double E. So immediately they were on my side. So I flew at 2 SAC bases, and when my flying time was up. Cuban Missile Crisis. I was at Homestead, Florida, and we did a hurricane evacuation. They wanted to get all the nuclear weapons out of Castro's range so that he couldn't launch something in and cause a dirty bomb explosion. So we launched on less than 24-hour notice every plane on the base for our hurricane evacuation when there wasn't a low pressure area within 1,500 miles of us. And of course, as soon as we were gone, the press saw it all, and it was announced what was going on. I got accepted into the electrical engineering department. I was the first graduate to teach electrical engineering, and one of the first handful of graduates to teach at all. So I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and wow. They were very good. They kind of let me choose. Since I was a volunteer, they said, "Where do you want to go?" And I looked around, and I picked what I was qualified for, and I went to Vietnam for almost 2 years. It was a long assignment, and I flew 600 combat missions, and my wing commander asked me to stay on, and I said, I've already stayed a little longer, and he said, well, I would like you to go to our standardization evaluation team and run that. And I said, I have a school assignment, and if I don't go, I will miss it. And that turned out to be a good thing too, because the guy that took the job got killed. So I've had a series. I then went back to graduate school again and got the PhD and came back to the academy to teach. And my same boss was there, and he asked me actually to come back a little early because he had, he had lost confidence in his executive officer, is the way they describe it these days. And he asked me to be his executive officer. So I did that for a few years and taught and did a lot of things. The academy offers a lot of opportunities for doing what you want to do, including research. And so once again, it was a really nice fit. And I was prepared to stay there for the rest of my career, as a lot of people like to do, because it's a good environment. But then the Congress passed a bill about how many years you had to, about what constituted a flying job, because our job was teaching. We did fly. We flew with cadets, but there was a nuance to the job code. Some of us qualified. I did not, even though I had met all the prior requirements. They put in new requirements and made them retroactive. So I and one of my friends from West Point, the dean was very good. He said, "You take an airplane, you go out and look for a job, and I'll give that job to you." So my West Point 59 fellow and I went out, and I went to the Flight Test Center, and I said, "There can't be a better job than this in the world." So I went to the Flight Test Center, and that was, once again, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And as I used to tell younger officers later, from then on, don't worry about the job you want. The Air Force is going to send you to the one they think they need you in. And unless it's a complete misfit and you think that there's something really wrong, just give it a try, because I did that and it turned out that was the best thing in my career. So I went to the Flight Test Center, and I was working the test of unmanned aircraft starting in 1976. And it was classified during Vietnam, but we had the same vehicles flying in Vietnam, but it was not well known that we were doing that. And so I got to do the test on the new ones and the new aircraft. We got aircraft, DC-130H, that would carry 4 unmanned aircraft. And that was the early days, and everybody at the Flight Test Center thought that anyone working in my outfit was a traitor, because who wants an aircraft with no pilot in it? And I explained to them that we were fearless, and in Vietnam we had never had anyone turn an unmanned aircraft. We called them RPVs in those days, remotely piloted vehicle. We'd never had one turn around because of the threat, and that we accomplished the mission very often and saved a lot of F-4C pilots' lives who were flying recon with the same camera that was on our classmate and good friend of mine was running the FSATCOM, Air Force Satellite Communications program. And he said, yeah, I'd like to have you. He was a test pilot and aero graduate from MIT. He said, I don't know an ohm from a volt. Why don't you come up here and help me? So I got there, and I worked as his deputy for a short while, and then he had to transfer for family reasons. And I had worked hard enough that I was the only logical person to take the job, and I was his deputy, so they put me into the job, which I did not have the requirements for. Every job has a list of requirements, and I had none of them. And the General Slay said, I'm not putting somebody that has none of the requirements in the job. But he retired, and I had the, you have to know the history. General Slay was a tough guy. And towards the end of his career, I briefed him and put him to sleep. So I don't know whether that was good or bad, but anyway, he left. And his replacement happened to be the 3-star that was getting promoted to 4 from my base that had recommended me. So I got the job.
It seems to me that you went from one best job to another best job to a better best job.
Well, I consider it that way, and everything was fortuitous. It was, you try to direct what you're going to do, but if they give you something that isn't what you want, go to it and give it your best. And so I stayed there, and then a new program came out called Millstar, which I helped start. And that was the military star. It was the replacement satellite program, and it is still being used today. Even that was in 1981 dollars. The FIDEP on the congressional line item was $41 billion for it in $81, and I couldn't get over sticker shock on it. $41 billion. When I briefed it, we rounded off to the nearest $100 million. You do 3 figures. So anyway, it became a real challenge, and it was. And I spent 4 years in that job and was about ready to retire, but my boss wanted me to go to another job, which I couldn't take for family health reasons. And so he said, well, where do you want to go? So I came back to Colorado, and I saw the opportunity because the Millstar program was being transferred out here to the Space Command, and I could work the same thing and actually use my knowledge that I had gained from being the program director to the installation. So I did that for a few years and then retired.
Wow. Wow.
I consider the Air Force to have done, and the U.S. government to have done so much for me. I mean, you and I know what happened. Well, most people know what happened to Jews, and this was long, long before that. But had my grandfather not come over here. He was still been here there in the 1930s, and it possibly it wouldn't have been Hitler. It would have been Stalin that did it. I am a Jew, and what I did in the military was Jewish, but not delineated as such. Most of it was irrespective of religion. Other than I don't even have that here. Remember, I was the Jewish lay leader at Hill Air Force Base, mainly because I was the senior Jew on the base, and they asked me to do it, and I felt that was, even though I had a busy job, that was something I ought to do. There was no there, as you know, there are not a lot of rabbis in the Air Force, and it's been a decreasing number for a long time. And there was no rabbi there, and we were systems command, the flight test center was a tenant on their base. We used the Hill Wendover Dugway range, and the fellow that was the two-star commander happened to have been the athletic director when I was a cadet. So he remembered, and he was extremely nice. Even though I wasn't in his command, he was very helpful. And anyway, somebody said, "You're the senior Jewish officer on base. Would you be the lay leader?" And I said, "Yes, except I'm got to find somebody else to lead the services because I'm a Reform Jew, and I'm sure I would not do it the way a lot of the service members want." There was a doctor there, a urologist, who did the Brit for my son, who was born shortly after I got there, who was a frustrated rabbi. He not only wanted to be a physician, he wanted to be a rabbi, and he was very good and very welcome to it. So the two of us, he did the religious part, and I did the organizational and the planning of things. The holidays we did not do. We went to Ogden or Salt Lake, and they brought us in. Mm-hmm. We had seders with them. I think having a positive approach is the main thing. If someone doesn't like you, just work a little harder for them. And if they continue not to like what you're doing, then it may be them, it may not be, but just everybody else will notice it, and that's the important thing. Most of the people I ran into the military were anxious to, if you were a good member of their unit, they went out of their way to try to I know in today's environment, everybody's got a chip. A lot of people have chips on their shoulder, and maybe some of them are deserved. I'm not commenting on everyone else, but it was my experience that most of the people in the Air Force tried to help their units. And if there was a complaint, a lot of the time, if it proved valid, the person doing the harm was the one that was corrected, not the one that was being harmed. I would say the positive approach, if you don't think what your unit is doing is the right thing, make suggestions. And that a lot of commanders appreciate, I would say most, appreciate people with new ideas. They may not implement them. Sometimes they may implement them and take credit themselves, but at least you've done something good. Look at the half full glass, not the half empty. And most people in the military do that. You make your friends are the people that you're working with, and all are a real asset. So being a loner is not a good idea, and having a positive approach. When I was in Strategic Air Command, I said, if I have to do if this is what I'm have to do, I'm gonna get out. But the only person that knew that was I. And so don't burn your bridges. Let work, and if you're working hard, nobody's going to know what you're thinking. And if you're doing a good job, nobody's going to know that you don't like it. I mean, one of the functions of military, especially in war, is to bitch. And everybody's complaining about this, that, and the other. And that's okay. But that's different from saying I myself am not getting my due. That's the thing. Or I think this is an outfit that I don't want to be in and I'm too good for it and whatever. Because a lot of people there that think that's a good thing and they're trying to do their best because they like it. And so keep your personal complaints to yourself. Have you ever read the book The Pledge by Leonard Slatter?
No.
It was about the formation of the state of Israel and how they knew they would immediately be attacked once, and that of course occurred. And I'd like to say I went to the academy because all my family's involvement, but I didn't even know the story until Leonard Slatter wrote this book in 1970, and there's a chapter on my family in it about
Really?
the arming of Israel in order to do battle. I owe this country, and I'm a great loyalist for this country. Yeah.